Francois Ernst is coming from Colmar, France. He is a cobbler by profession, and he found that St. Paul was in need of a cobbler, and he opened his shop. His wife, Mary Madeline, was with him, and he also recognized that he could add a contribution to the community. And we Ernsts take big pride in that being a part of our family element in this community. Francois had several children, and one of his children, Henry C.H. Ernst, was my grandfather, and he is the man who opened Ernst Hardware. Henry was a businessman, a dreamer, and he made strong investments in equipment and brought it to St. Paul and found that he could sell to the farmers. So he brought in a very nice line of equipment. But Henry was also a father of an unusual group of kids, and they had music in their hearts, they had music in their feet, and they were also card players. And so this is what I observed, that the community loved to gather at Henry's house when the kids were making music. Elmer was on the trumpet, Vincent was on the harmonica, Jimmy was on the drums, and Virginia was on the keyboard. And our whole community loved the Ernsts and their music.
I worked for R.M. Wade in Portland for a total of 9 years. And the last couple of years I was there, I knew that I didn't want to spend the rest of my life there. And the reason is that they were wonderful people, this Newbegin family. But any promotion that I would receive would involve national travel. National travel and a young family are not compatible. So my wife at the time, Joyce, and I sat down and talked it over, and we decided that the best thing to do was to try to get into a retail business in the Willamette Valley here, which we both liked.
Lester Ernst is Henry's son, and he stepped into the Ernst Hardware story, and this is a family story, and I know it's the truth. His sisters, Teresa and Virginia, told me this story. Their brother, Lester, was good at math. He was in St. Paul High School, and he was good at math. And Henry, his father, said, "Young man, I think I'm sending you to college. You're material." So Lester went to Oregon State. He always had math as a skill and a gift. But at college, he found that the classes were hard. And he was in a struggle. And how could he let his father down and himself, because the whole community was investing in him? And so he got this idea, what can I do to come home with success and favor? And he wrote a letter to John Deere Equipment and said, I, Lester Ernst, would like a franchise. And I have a place in St. Paul. We are a farm community. And they give him a franchise. He comes home. Walt Bernard helps him build his shop. And I saw a picture of my dad on opening day. John Deere Equipment. He has on a suit, a white shirt, a tie, and a hat. And the John Deere tractors are sitting on oriental rugs in St. Paul. And he is smiling, and then a gentleman. There's this St. Paul always finds gentlemen. His name was Pete Murphy, and he became the sugar daddy for my dad. He said, Lester, whatever tractor you want, whatever piece of equipment you want, I will finance that, and you fill your shop, and you get out and sell. Now, C.H. Ernst is half a block up the street, watching his son doing a John Deere dealership. And he walks down and says, "Boy, son, I want to join you in your business." And so they worked out an arrangement, and C.H. Ernst gave up his International Harvester dealership, and he joined John Deere.
So we picked out some towns where we thought there was potential, and St. Paul was one of them, because it's a good farming community. So I got a call one night from this sledge, Ernst, and he asked me about a couple people, and I gave him my opinion. And then the question I had is, well, why are you asking? And he says, well, you know, we've been trying to sell the business and nobody wants it, so we just decided to close it down. And a couple of farmers south of town here says you can't do that because we need that service here. So he said, I'm Willie and Don were the farmers south of town here, and they had a proposition for Sledge that says, hey, if you can get somebody to run it, let's go ahead and we'll have that service here in the community. So getting back to my question to Sledge is, why are you asking? He says, well, we need somebody to run it. And I said, well, how about me? And there was a long silence on the other end. He says, I'll get back to you. So he called back in about a half an hour, and he'd talked to Willie Richardson and Don Davidson in the meantime. And his question to me is, well, when do you want to start? So middle of January in 1965 is when I started here. There were 5 individuals involved initially, including Don Davidson. And Don was he was really a good partner. He kind of sat in the background and didn't say a whole lot, but when he did say something, it was relevant and to the point. And he was really good, and he died a few years ago. I forget, somewhere around 2000. And he still had an interest in it. And the choice was to pay him off, pay the family off, or they could stay involved. Well, they kind of wanted to stay involved. So now there were 8 Davidson children. Well, that's pretty cumbersome. But they were smart enough so that they delegated 2 of the Davidson sons to be active, kind of. And one of them is a CPA, and the other one is an attorney. So they don't get involved in the day-to-day business, but they're there, and they offer some pretty good advice.
My name is John Kirsch, and my father and Lester Ernst were good friends. My dad was a farmer, and he used John Deere and Caterpillar equipment, which the Ernst hardware sold and serviced. So my dad and Lester became good friends because of that connection. Well, some of my most vivid memories, as Claudia alluded to, were the John Deere days, or whatever they referred to them as, that they used to have. And that was always a big function when I was a child, because we had pop and ice cream and all that stuff. And then the one part that I most enjoyed was, I believe it was usually over at the City Hall, they had the movie on John Deere equipment, and it showed it working in the fields in their new line of products and all that sort of stuff. And that was always quite interesting to me. And then the other thing was that the hardware store sold a variety of goods. They had tractor parts and things there, as well as household items that Claudia's mother was kind of in charge of that department, I guess. And so they had real nice gifts if you needed something for a wedding and just things like of that nature.
My name is Carol Brentano. I was an Ernst. I was born and raised here in St. Paul. My father was Norman Ernst. He was a farmer and raised row crops. And early in my life, I was told I was going to be part of the farm, and so we always had to get up and go change irrigation pipe. And in those days, it was not aluminum, it was steel, and it was very heavy. So my sister and I did a lot of that because we were the firstborn. Well, my dad was born here in St. Paul in 1906, and he was an only child. He was the son of Louis Ernst, who was a brother to Henry Ernst, who is the beginner of Ernst hardware. And my father had the farm down at Horseshoe Lake area, and my grandfather, Louis Ernst, had peaches. So there was a peach orchard, and we grew up harvesting peaches especially. And then when the irrigation came along, we had the row crops. My dad was, like I said, an only child, and he was a very talented man. He was a musician and played the piano and the accordion and the organ at church. And he was well known throughout the area for playing for different parties. And at the rodeo, they had a special area. It's now called the bullpen, but this was an area where they had music every night. People could go and dance, and he played the piano, and another local guy named Ivan Blosser played the xylophone, and another guy named Art Faber played the saxophone. So we grew up in a house full of music, and we were all given music lessons throughout our lives. But we have lots of fond memories of growing up on the farm.
I'm Mike Davidson. I do a lot of business here. I farm locally, and I buy equipment and parts here at Ernst Irrigation. I'm on the board of directors, and we meet once a year. And Pat takes care of most things by himself, but once a year we get together and finalize things. I think Sledge wanted someone to help him run the store, and so they found a few people to buy in and be owners. And my dad was very involved with operations because he did business here, so it was just a natural step for him to be one of the owners.
My name is Fred Davidson. I am Don Davidson's son and currently a shareholder of Ernst Irrigation. Well, I'm sort of on the younger end of all my siblings, so my first memories would be just coming in as a kid. you know, riding around in Dad's pickup, probably on a Saturday, and then he would stop by the store, to chit chat or pick something up, and I'd just kind of wander through the aisles, you know, looking at what might be around. So I'm probably 8, 9, something like that.
When Kate and Lester decided to sell, there was a number of young men who came to interview and see if they wanted to step up to the business of Ernst Hardware with all the elements in the community. And a number of the young men just qualified. And then they added an element to the interview. They had their wives come to St. Paul. And that's when the big surprise came. The wives said, "No, I will not live in this town. I will not raise my children here. There is no bus service, there is no pharmacy, and there is no movie house." And so that happened for a number of years, that reaction of wives. The community scared them. It was Catholic school, Catholic church, And then another opportunity came from Wade Rain. Wade Rain, very important friendship, personal, and Bill Dolan's name surfaced in the business, and they had sort of a few comments about him, but because of this other experience, they said, "Wait till we test the wife." And so Joyce Dolan was brought to an interview, and she said, "Yes, I want to raise my kids here. Yes to St. Paul. I like everything about it. And what an opportunity for me and Bill to bring our 4 children and raise them in St. Paul." And for my dad and Hugh Rear, this is Wade Rain Irrigation, they love Joyce Dolan because she was the first wife who said yes to St. Paul. And that story was told again and again about the happiness they had about this girl. Her name is Joyce Dolan.
My name is John Brentano. I farm with my brothers on our family farm here in St. Paul. We raise a variety of crops. Brother Dan and I are involved in the field crops and the row crops, so like the grass seed, hazelnuts, garlic, green beans, squash, any other things we decide to grow that way, radish for seed, things like that.
My name is Mike Dolan. I'm 58 years old. I've been working at this company since I was 7 years old. Started working for my father in the irrigation department, putting together rings and latches for aluminum pipes, sprinklers, nozzles, that kind of stuff, and worked all through grade school and high school and college here, doing various and miscellaneous tasks that would help the business move along. I also went out and worked for one of the local farmers during high school, Sam Smith at Horseshoe Lake Farms, moving pipes, setting pumps, so I got to learn some of the business from their side of the industry, and have had a wonderful learning experience growing up and seeing different aspects of the irrigation equipment industry from a very practical standpoint, including the end users and how it comes from the different assembly components and into actually usable equipment. It was never expected of us to stay and make this a career. I decided after I had had some training down Oregon State and Arizona State in areas pertaining to the industry that we're in now, that I liked it, and I liked the people that we were working with, the kind of work that we were doing, and I did have other job opportunities over the years because of my training, but I did really enjoy the people and products and the places that we worked, so I chose to move into this on more of a career basis at that time.
Hi, my name is Patrick Dolan. I'm the general manager for Ernst Irrigation and one of the owners, and the secretary for our corporation. Part of what I do here is I work with the financials and with our personnel. I interact with our bank and with our accountants and interpret our numbers and make decisions based off of those. Do a lot of our purchasing of our equipment and some of our parts, and that's a lot of what I do. I kind of fell into it because I did have a couple other opportunities. One, I could have went to Montana. I had an offer to go to work for Columbia Grain in Montana, but one thing I did know was that I liked the area. I really liked being in the Willamette Valley, and so that was kind of key, was location. And I remember growing up that it was important to my dad and to my mom that they didn't have to travel. And so that was an important thing for me, was that I could get a job that I didn't have to travel a lot, because I wanted to be around for my kids. And so that was kind of the focus, or one of the main parameters in my job search. And so I kind of kept it local. And this job at West Valley Farmers and this pump position was one that just came available, and I took it because of that. Things were tough, as I remember, and it wasn't real easy to get a job at the time, and so I felt fortunate to get the one that I did.
Well, in 1964, the Dolan family, we moved to St. Paul. My father had been hired at Ernst Hardware as the general manager, and what's kind of ironic is that a few years later, little brother Patrick, who had not been born yet, also became the general manager of the store. So I think, that's kind of a legacy in itself right there. We lived in Bert Bernard's old rental house just down the street here on Christie, and it was a nice little neighborhood, lots of kids and stuff. And my first job when I was 4 years old was just right down the street working for Hub Drescher. And we picked berries, had berry fights, and then in the fall we picked up filberts. And this is all when I was 4 years old. And that was a pretty good way to learn a work ethic at a young age, and also to make some lifelong friends. And I'm pretty sure that Hub and Marguerite Drescher just ran the neighborhood babysitting service, which I'm sure all the parents were very grateful for. When I moved out of St. Paul in 1979, I didn't think I'd ever come back. I didn't leave on real good terms with my dad, or my mother for that fact. So, I just moved on and had my own life for quite a while, got involved in the music business, and then, that kind of burned out. And then in 1991, Mitch and I were both invited to come back to work here at Ernst. And at that time, we were, I think, a little bit more mature and ready for something more stable and steady, and we accepted the offer to come work here.
Right, the Ernst Hardware, as I remember, it was originally it was when it was built, there was two businesses there. It'd be the north half, I guess, was a furniture store. Then the south half was a billiards hall, as I remember originally. And then when Lester bought the business, of course, both of those things left, and the part that had been furniture store, they put into gifts and sporting goods and things like that. And the other south half, where they had been the billiards tables and stuff, that became more of the agricultural farming supplies and the parts department and that sort of thing. You could buy roller chains and all kinds of nuts and bolts and things like that that you might need to supply a shop.
Bruce Ernst, Henry was my grandfather, but he died before I was born, so didn't have the pleasure of meeting him. My father was Elmer, and he was the second oldest boy. My dad farmed a little and worked out, and then I started the nursery. Started Ernst Nursery, and in high school I put some stuff in, and then took a horticulture program at Mount Hood, and worked at a local nursery here, and then slowly got mine going, and it was sustainable, and I quit my job and started it. You know, I didn't have much credit when I was getting started, and Bill Dolan, again, I think they had a huge thing you'd have to fill out for a credit app. And Bill, they needed some arborvitaes for they'd acquired a piece of property next to them there, and they wanted to fence it off with shrubs. And Bill came to me to get some shrubs, and whatever the bill came to, and I said, gosh, can I just have credit there and put this towards my, and that was it. I've had credit ever since. I never filled out anything.
Yeah, my dad was born and raised here in St. Paul, as was his dad, as was his dad. So, my dad purchased what is now the Century Farm off of Davidson Road from his grandfather, so we've had the same piece of property for 120 years or 115 years now. Wow. So my dad went through the whole thing with horses and plows and tractors, and has watched the evolution of things come along.
Well, the ownership of the store was, yes, he did own part of it, but the day-to-day decisions were made by the management, and he kind of took a back seat to the operations. He came in and drank coffee every day with the boys, and I'm sure if the management had questions, they would ask him. He'd spend half hour, 45 minutes at the store most mornings, so they could conduct a little bit of business if they needed to.
Well, Bill and Joyce came to St. Paul in the 1960s. I remember Bill came to when we lived where we lived and introduced himself to us, and we thought he was a nice man, and we got acquainted, and in fact, his wife and I became very good friends because she also was a nurse and we worked together. Ernst Hardware was at one time not just irrigation pipe and tools and things. It also had a gift area where Claudia Ernst Smith, her mother Kate, was gifted at putting together beautiful packages and beautiful ribbons and a nice presentation. I do remember that. I remember Ernst Hardware when it was across the street in the old store. In fact, I probably have some pictures of Uncle Henry and some of his, I do believe we had a ledger that people would come and purchase something at the store and they were not able to pay money, so they would bring eggs or milk, and that was the way they paid off their bill.
My name's Don. I've been working at Ernst Hardware since the mid-60s. Started in there as a VOAG student in St. Paul High School. Did it for the VOAG credit, which turned into working full-time after work, and then eventually out of high school, went a couple years to college, and in 1971 went to work full-time at Ernst.
Bill Coleman. I've been farming here since 1952. In 1966, my brother and I bought a 14-foot CC cultivator from Lester Ernst sledge for $610, and I know he sold it to us reasonable because he was a good old boy, and I don't know, we've been coming in here ever since. The town of St. Paul, you pretty well know everybody that comes in here. Everybody uses it, so they do a wonderful job.
The fun part, though, and I think probably the crux of what my tenure here was the development of the hard hose traveler. The hard hose traveler, of course, is one of these big reel machines it may have a quarter mile of 4-inch polyethylene hose on it, and it drags a small gun cart with a big gun through the field. Our introduction into that was really kind of slow and a little bit maybe sloppy. We started off, and of course, our philosophy is you find out what the customer needs, you address it, and you provide for them. Our introduction to that was we had a salesman come by and tell us that we had to sell them. And Bill and I were sitting in the office and listening to his sales spiel, and he started telling us things that we knew hydraulically were impossible. And so I looked at Bill, and he looked at me, and he stood up and said, "Thank you for your time," and we walked out the door. And after that, we kind of ignored it for about 2 years because we said, okay, we now sell soft hose travelers. The entrance pressures are less. The cost is less. Why would we ever want to do that? Until we started talking to our customers. And they said, well, you know, I had spiel down that would tell you that it only took you about 20 to 30 minutes to move a soft hose traveler if you were really careful and really fast. The hard hose travelers were a simple thing. You just hooked onto them with a tractor and pulled them out for another run. And so they convinced us that maybe we need to look at it. So we went ahead and we got involved with a commercial brand on it. And that particular group of people did a real good job for about 4 or 5 years. And then the distribution was sold off to a different company that did business differently than we preferred to do. So being farm-oriented type people, if you can't find what you want, you make it, right? So we went into a cooperative working relationship with the GK machine shop in Donald. What it boiled down to is Mike and Bill and I sat down with Gary and his cousin, an engineer, and we decided all the things that we needed to have the thing not do as well as have it do. And lo and behold, we eventually developed out a pattern for the first machine. And we had a lot of fun in development, a lot of false starts, but eventually we came out with a product that still is being manufactured.
I believe in selling value, providing value to the customer, which is Ernst's philosophy. And we could work together to achieve that. And occasionally there would be technical problems, and I'd go out in the field and work with Harold or some of the other guys trying to solve a hydraulics or pump problem.
Well, I think when I was getting started, I started farming when I was 18. So I actually had an FFA project in high school, so a little earlier than that. But quite frankly, my mom and dad helped me get started quite a bit. And so I would tag along with my dad to come into the store here and go to the hardware store and get some parts, or the parts department for tractors or equipment, get parts. And you just got to know a few more people. And at that point, there was certainly people that had been here a while. And as I started to grow up and do more of my own, those same people were still here, which created that connection that was easy to talk to them because they'd seen me when I was littler and gave me a little bit of, they saw me, I guess you could say. They knew who that kid was and what he was trying to do, and so they were very helpful. Very helpful. And so they were always very friendly coming in the store, and certainly that makes it easier to approach them and ask them for some help.
Oh, certainly I grew up with them. They weren't classmates of mine. Pat is younger, Jill and Mike are older than me, and but you know, we were around the family all the time. For me, a lot of Ernst Hardware was the John Deere store because it was John Deere. I even have one of the old sweatshirts on, I guess, from as the transition out of the John Deere moved out and has changed now. And it was pretty important to all of us when they were able to keep the irrigation here local. We were pretty happy about that.
Growing up, working with my dad was always I guess a treat. He was always a hard worker, and it was all about, with Dad, it was all about farm and community, really. He would put any neighbor ahead of himself and help them out or help the community in whatever aspect they needed. And he didn't need to be in the lights, so to speak. He just made it happen. And then growing up with him farming, you know, he just taught us a lot. You know, that you take care of the dirt and it'll take care of you. You know, he always stressed to us, you know, that be good stewards of the land, and it's got to be there or you won't have anything. And he taught us not to be afraid to get our hands dirty, and if there was a job to be done, none of us were any better than any of our employees. Get after it. Get right in there and work with the guys, and that's really the philosophy my brothers and I all have, is we're right out there with the crew, working with them, getting our hands dirty, and we want to know how to do everything on our farm, as well as be able to teach our employees. And I think another thing Dad really taught us was to treat the employees like family, and we strive to do that. I don't know how well we do it, but we feel like they're family. We have a lot of 20-plus year employees, and I guess that's about what I got there.
I can just remember that there used to be a Copeland lumber yard here, and that cat just sticks in my mind. You know. But St. Paul actually, back when I grew up, was, to me, I considered a bigger town. We had 2 grocery stores, we had 2 gas stations. Of course, we had the hardware store, irrigation, the feed mill across the street, and the market that's across from the parochial school was like a small Knapp's. It was a full-fledged market. They both had like a butcher shop in it and lockers in the back. So St. Paul was quite different back then.
From there, we started realizing that not everybody wants high-pressure systems, and the drip market or micro market and the micro irrigation is I think probably one of the fastest development markets now, and one of the stable ones. And as we got into it, I started trying to design, and then I found out that first of all, I didn't have time, and secondly, I didn't have the knowledge. So we ended up hiring a man to do that. And it's eventually turned into they now have 2 people here doing nothing but micro irrigation on the sales end of it. It fits a lot of needs and opens it up to a different customer base.
Growing up here in St. Paul, got to know Bill Dolan really through his kids. His son Patrick, who's the manager here at Ernst, we were classmates growing up, and my mom and Pat's mom were nurses, and I remember one of the first times I actually met Pat was our moms were doing the weighing and measuring at the local school for all the kids, running them through. And so at the end of the session of weighing and measuring, I remember our moms taking us to the local rodeo inn for lunch. And that really doesn't say a lot about Bill, but I guess I'm kind of working with the next generation. Bill I obviously knew, and our dad worked with Bill a lot more than we did directly, but I grew up with Pat. We spent nights at each other's homes. We've always been really like family, and of course knowing Jill and Mike and Tim, and got to know the whole Dolan family. One of my probably fondest memories of Bill was Pat invited me to go to the state championship basketball playoffs in Pendleton, Oregon. And that was a big thing. Our family didn't travel a lot.
you know, we'd go to the coast occasionally and whatnot, but that was a big thing, going to this big basketball tournament. And I just thought Bill, he just spoiled me on that trip. Of course, he was just feeding me meals, but I really thought he was a pretty neat guy.
Okay, I think one of the things that I learned from my father was his philosophy regarding customers and people in general, employees included. And I learned a great deal of respect for people based on some of his philosophies.
When the opportunity came up for us to purchase the business, I remember one particular morning. It was the day after the John Deere sign came down. It was right, I think it was June 1st of 2009. I remember sitting in the downstairs break room, looking out the window longingly at where the John Deere sign used to be. And I remember wondering, well, now what the hell are we going to do? And about that time, the door behind me opened up and in walked Joe Beelart. And Joe Beelart took one look at me and he said, "Why the hell haven't you made coffee?" And I said, "Well, I'll get right on that, Joe." And then pretty soon, here comes Sam Smith, one of our customers, former fireman. Burt Bernards, former fire chief. Dick Kirk, another customer. Mike Davidson, one of our owners and customers. Bill Gooding, one of our customers, among many others. George Bernards, Charlie Bernards. They just came in like it was business as usual. And it was at that very moment that I knew we were going to be okay. And so that's one of the things I learned, was that things may change, but some things are going to stay the same. And so we kept this business here and we kept it going. And I learned about the community, I guess, and the connection with our customers. And that really, really brought it home to me that day.
We do have here in the employee base an incredible pool of experience in different trainings and academic fields that have combined to make a pool of experienced employees here that is really quite unique. There's not many places that I know of, and I've been in this business quite a while, that have that level of expertise available that service this industry. In the state of Oregon, we're a very unique business that has all these things combined.
Employees are the strength of the business. And nobody told me this, but I kind of figured it out on my own, that employees have a lot of good ideas. So I used to try to take about an hour a day just visiting with different employees. And I picked up a lot of good ideas on just a real informal basis from the employees. Our philosophy was, we'll do the very best that we can. And we'll give one price, and it'll be a good price. And that's kind of the end of the negotiations right there, once we give them this real good price. And it takes a while for people to accept that. But after they accept it, it sure saves a lot of time. And we bought a business, Cascade Tractor, over in McMinnville. And their philosophy on sales was to start high and negotiate with the customer until they reached a price that was agreeable to both parties. That takes a lot of time. And when we went over there with our one price philosophy, it took a while to convert those people from negotiating to finally deciding, well, it's a fair price, I guess. We like it or we don't. And if they didn't like it, well, they could go someplace else. But, well, I'll tell you, that took a while to convert those people from negotiating every sale to giving them the best price first.
Speaking of customer service, I fumbled with it quite a bit at first, and one day Ed Brentano came into the store and he said he wanted to talk to one of the salespeople. So me being the loudmouth that I am, I just yelled, "Mike, Harold, there's a customer here to see you." Well, Ed turns and looks at me and corrects me and says, "That's potential customer." And that was a lesson learned that will never be forgotten, as will Ed Brentano. That he was a special man. Speaking of Ed Brentano, it's families like the Brentanos that keep our doors open. I've seen 3 generations of these families coming through these doors, and I've learned from them that if you take care of your customer, they'll take care of you. And it has been the honor of my life to serve the agricultural community. I have got the world's best customers.
Well, this is one of the things that we're very fortunate to be a part of, is our customer base is very progressive, and they're changing. Our industry is changing all the time and becoming more and more technical, and so we have to be able to move with them. And that's where that trust and that relationship with your customers is critical, because they're going to come to you when they've got something they're looking at and maybe considering doing, and they're looking for a partner to go there with them. And that's where we're very, very lucky to have that connection with them. And so I feel very good about that.
Our introduction into the pivot market was again kind of strange. We sat back and we looked at the market and realized from an economic standpoint that a lot of our dealerships had a real difficult time getting involved in pivots if they were a standard irrigation dealership before. We also looked at it and realized that in the marketplace, the big companies were dominating. If you had a project of 2 pivots, then they would call that a company project and give you a stipend and ask you to service it. So we kind of ignored it for a while, until all of a sudden, again, the customer base came back and told us what we needed to do. And so we've now involved with the Valley brand, and they are doing a good, aggressive job of marketing it even today.
Well, when I first started out, like most kids back in the olden days, or working for their families when you could do this, started out with moving pipe. Irrigation pipe was one of the summer jobs that you did to make money during the summer. So I did that for a while, then went to work for Brentano Farms for a little bit, working during the summer. And then the VOAG deal with, I had to really bug the agriculture instructor, Mr. Grover, to get me into this. And we finally talked up here, and they finally had an opening, and I came up, and just one thing led to another. Store was a great place to work. I'd come in here for an hour during school for credits, and then that led into working after school till we closed, which in turn led to a summertime job, which led down the road to a full-time job.
After 2000, we saw a need for our company to develop into the electrical control segment of the business because of all of the customer requests to do smart controls, electrical service controls that would make for greater efficiencies. And we started hiring electricians at that time, and we've now got 3 on staff. And they've done a very good job of helping to get motor efficiencies and system efficiencies, and help the whole business grow into that segment of it. That is going to be a future for this industry, and our company is the the smart controller systems, smartphones that can do so much with the controlling and monitoring of the different type of systems. That is a growth area of our company we're going to focus on here in the future. As the technology allows us to create a higher level of precision nutrient and energy management in the type of work that we're doing, it's going to allow us to become a greater factor in the Willamette Valley and other markets for helping the agricultural industry grow and progress and deal with the challenges that we have facing us in the future.
One thing that I've learned as a general manager and owner of the business is that our customer always has a choice, and that they will always exercise their right to choose. And we have to remember that every time that we do business with them. And that's critical for us going forward, is we can never forget that.
When I first started here, we had a pretty limited parts inventory and parts department. And a good month back in the day was $250,000. We thought we were really rolling in clover if we hit $250,000 back in the early 90s. Now we've got $2.5 million in parts inventory, and it takes up acres. And our record month was over $3.5 million in the drought of 2015. The logistics of stocking all the parts needed to keep the equipment that we've sold over the years up and running can be kind of staggering. When equipment gets redesigned, the parts often get redesigned, but you have to be able to service the old and the new as well. And so one of the challenges that we're up against is where do we find room for all of these parts? Every time we bring in a new product line, we have to provide the training to our employees, we have to provide product support to our customers, we have to bring in a parts inventory, tie up a bunch of money, and then find a spot to put it and load it all into the computer.
Technology is evolving, we're evolving with it. In fact, we're leading the evolution in some segments of the technology and the applications of it. We are committed to this industry. We are not going anywhere. The company's been at this location for 100 years, and as far as I'm concerned, if we're here another 100 years, I expect it to be. And so we are going to, we're not going anywhere. We're here for the long haul. And that's our families and our company's philosophy, is that we are here to be a voice of and a partner in the agricultural industry for the Willamette Valley for years to come.